what happens with couples, right, as the focus of the episode, is they have different beliefs because they were presumably raised differently. They had different experiences at different points in their lives. And as a result, they may look at the other one and think, why is he or she being so illogical? Who would do that?
Ever notice how you and your partner think about money totally differently? That's often because of something called money scripts, the beliefs about money we learn early on and don't even realize we're following. Today, we're talking about how those beliefs show up in relationships and how understanding them can make money conversations a whole lot easier. Hello, and welcome to Money on Your Mind from Edelman Financial Engines. I'm Michael Leirsch, a behavioral scientist, financial planner, and your chief planning officer at EFE. Thanks for joining us for a conversation about how people are feeling about money, what they're wrestling with, and how financial planning can help you straighten things out. Today, we're talking with Chris Davidson, an EFE financial planner. Chris, welcome to Money on Your Mind.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
Well, we're excited to hear about money scripts, Chris. And our listeners, our audience, they like to know a little bit about you. And I know you've been a planner now for many years and that you're passionate about advice, but it would be great to hear your perspective on where you're coming from, why being a planner is so important to you, and just to give us a little bit about your personal life as well. So why don't you give it to us? Tell us about yourself.
Sure. So in my personal life, I'm married to a beautiful brain doctor named Becky, and we have two children who I think are absolutely amazing, named Mason and Chloe, and they are 8 and 6. And Becky and I met living in Chicago. I had gone there to study at Northwestern, and she was in medical school. We met shortly after that. And I was already a financial planner, and then we moved back here to Novi, Michigan to join Edelman Financial Engines. And being a financial planner is something that I've really always seen with myself. I chose financial planner as my career day project in 7th grade and never really wavered from that. What I'm passionate about as a financial planner is being a thinking partner with my clients. I realize that everybody who comes to talk to us is really an expert in themselves, what they want, what they're looking to accomplish, who they are, where they've been. What they don't know is the technical aspects of personal finance. And so financial planning done right to me is melding the technical aspects with their desires and facilitating that process.
Let's go ahead and get into it. When we think about what you're hearing from clients and this topic of money scripts, can you tell us a little bit about what you feel a money script is and how it's influencing your clients' behavior right now?
Yeah, well, that's exactly what it is. A money script is a belief, typically unconscious, that a person has that's sort of running in the background 24/7 and driving their decision-making behavior. And again, as it's unconscious, probably more than we realize, right? And so oftentimes uncovering and making conscious, making explicit what those beliefs are can then help people to improve the decisions they make when they're trying to put together a financial plan.
So Chris, I know there's different categories of money scripts that people carry with them, which might help people maybe more tangibly grasp, this, maybe to them it feels like a bit of a theoretical concept. Can you share those 4 categories and maybe a few examples around them?
Yeah, so each person has typically a couple hundred, 50 to 200, they say in the research, beliefs about money that are firing unconsciously. And they generally fall into 4 categories. And everybody, me very much included, has some in all 4 categories. But typically there's one category that's a little more dominant than the others. And so those 4 categories can include money status, which is essentially, I only want to buy the best. My money is to be shown off, right? We can all think of like brand names that mean wealth or expense. There's money worship, which is, I think, in culture can be summed up with Ebenezer Scrooge, if you can think of that character, right? Somebody who just has to hold on to all money and there's never enough money. Money vigilance, which is somebody who believes that money requires very careful care and constant tracking, so budgeting and a lot of discretion. We don't talk about money a lot, but we very carefully watch every penny. And then money avoidance, which is people who often want to get themselves extricated from any conversations about money. They don't like to be around it. They don't like to talk about it. They don't like to deal with it. It's sort of a procrastination strategy.
I love these categories, Chris, because I can say I grew up with money vigilance and avoidance as primary money scripts. So what are some common ones that you're seeing with your clients? You said some of these things dominate others. Is there something that you're seeing a lot of right now that maybe our listeners could relate to in terms of the money scripts they're carrying with them?
Yeah, absolutely. And first, let me add that money scripts there's like a spectrum of how strong or how dominant they are. You may have a money script that is driving more of your behavior than other scripts, but it still may be a fairly flexible script, right? The problems come when somebody is very rigid in one of their beliefs, and then they're trying to function at a time when that rigid belief doesn't serve them, right? So two examples that I see all the time from clients are, one is you have to work hard for money, and the other is money should be saved, not spent. People who can save money and people who like to work hard and build up income and things are potentially great clients. But things change when you start to approach retirement, right? For many people, if they're especially rigid in their thoughts about you have to work hard for money and money should be saved, have a hard time transitioning to I'm not working and I have money, and I'm not saving money and I'm spending money, right? And sometimes you see, lately we've seen a lot of this. One spouse is ready for their spouse to retire from a long, hardworking career, move on to the next chapter, be present with kids and grandkids, travel the world. And the other person is, maybe they're ready to leave their job, but they're not ready to flip that script of, well, I'm not going to work hard anymore, and there's going to be money. And I'm not saving anymore, and now I'm spending.
So when you think about this idea of two human beings collaborating around money, especially to your point when you're transitioning to a time and ultimately will be in a place where there's no income from work coming in, how does that manifest itself in terms of an outcome? Are there a lot of arguments and conflicts? How do you potentially get ahead of that? Or if you're in it, how do you get past it? Can you share some ideas there?
Yeah, great question. So what happens with couples, right, as the focus of the episode is they have different beliefs because they were presumably raised differently. They had different experiences at different points in their lives. And as a result, they may look at the other one and think, why is he or she being so illogical? Who would do that, right? And what happens is when you start to understand the beliefs driving the behavior, all of a sudden it makes perfect sense, right? And so what would help is to sit down and, again, make those beliefs explicit. Understand, what is it that I actually believe about money and why do I believe that? And sometimes it's as easy as going, oh yeah, when I was in my 20s and 30s, maybe I had a bad experience with debt. Maybe I had a parental, I grew up in a household that was very money vigilant. And as a result, I adopted the strategy that if I work hard for the next 20 years, I'll make a lot of money. And that's exciting to me. Then you stop and you go, does that belief still serve me? Right? And start to think about the alternatives. Can I work hard and not make money? Right? Certainly there are people in society today who are in that position. Can I not work hard and still have money? Right? There's plenty of people in that situation too. And that's where you build in the flexibility to the belief. So step one is, what do I believe? Right? And we can talk a little about how to get there. Step two is, how do I make that more flexible? How do I adapt that to the current situation? But yes, to answer your question, the conflicts often come when one spouse is on one place with their beliefs and then their scripts, and the other spouse is in a completely different side of money scripts, a completely different dominant category, and doesn't understand the behavior because they don't have the same beliefs.
So let's role play a little bit here, Chris, to make it super tangible for our listeners, because I know I can relate to this quite a bit in my financial life. Let's say a decade or ago, I had very inflexible scripts that were driving my behavior, which is a do not spend a dime. And my wife had a much more, I'm just going to be honest, like a much more flexible narrative around it. It was context dependent. Did it add value to our lives or not? And if so, let's spend. If not, let's not, which is a bit more productive to be real with our audience. So we got in a lot of fights. And I remember my daughter, I've been podcasting for a while. She went on a podcast and shared with everyone a story about my wife and I getting in an argument in a store very publicly around this. And at the time she was 11 and probably completely humiliated by the situation, Chris. So not a great thing to carry forward. And I changed my behavior after hearing her talk about it. So let's say you have a couple in transitioning or in retirement in this motion where one isn't working, to your point, and doesn't want to spend, the other one isn't working and is much more flexible, and there's conflict. How would you sit down and invite this kind of dialogue where it doesn't lead to more arguing, but instead it leads to more understanding? Like, what does that actually look like in terms of a process? Am I at my breakfast table? Is it over wine in the evening, beginning of dinner? Like, what does that look like?
I mean, if the couple's doing it themselves, you can do it all of those places. And I certainly recommend a relaxed environment. If you're here in my office, you're sitting on the couch, maybe enjoying a small piece of chocolate, and we're just going to explore, what is it that I believe about money and retirement? What do I believe about not working and spending, right? And sometimes they can write it down. I've got a notepad over there, and sometimes they can just talk it out. But that's when we can introduce a pause and say, okay, and can we make that more context dependent, as you say, which is just the key to all of it? Can we be more flexible with that? Are there other ways to look at it? Is that still serving you? And oftentimes we can make a lot of progress when people uncover those moments. The empathy that comes out when the light goes on and one spouse goes, now I see, to you, this was about, right, an earlier time in life, right? All of a sudden, it's not, we're trying to be right about the thing. It's, okay, now we have a bigger context. Now we can work together to facilitate what we're going to do next.
I love this, Chris, because in spending, saving, I can see this a lot. Are there any, before we transition to questions we always ask on the podcast, is there anything else topically that you see creating this type of friction where you can unlock it by articulating these money scripts and then trying to find more flexibility and problem solving on the other side? What are some other examples?
So I think doing the work yourself. So there are, believe it or not, there are clinically tested science-backed diagnostics you can take. If you Google, you might be able to find them. But really, just sit down with a notepad and a list of words. What do I believe about money and kids? What do I believe about money and taxes? And let yourself write really quickly and suspend judgment, suspend any shame. Just let yourself acknowledge what your gut reactions are to each of those phrases that you can think of, right? Because that's your limbic system of your brain working there. And while that can easily be overcome at times, you want to know kind of what is that quick initial response that I have to these things, right? And the more you can understand that, then you can start to think about it, right? And process how it might actually be different than what your initial reaction is.
So if you could give us an example of where you've seen this type of writing exercise, information sharing, where you've been involved, an example of a decision that it's unlocked that's led a couple or financial partners to a better place. Do you have an example of that?
I think to me, it's very often the decision of when to retire, right? And so sometimes when you start to unlock this, you start to realize that the decision to retire is not about whether or not you're enjoying the work you're doing, whether or not you're enjoying the context in which you go to work every day. And it's more about what do you want to do next, right? And what would make you happier and more fulfilled in life to take that next step. And a lot of times people come in thinking, I'm not ready to retire yet because I'm on this project and I've got this team that I'm leading and no one could do this without me. And then after thinking through their beliefs, especially around the ones I identified, you have to work hard for money, money should be saved, not spent, they end up pivoting to what's really important to me now is I don't know how long I've got left, right? We all hope we have a long time. And I need to get to the travel and the grandkids and my spouse and my hobbies and start this next phase. And it was really just my rigidity in not wanting to give up work for money and not wanting to start spending what I've accumulated and worked so hard for to make that flip. It was never about my indispensability at the office. It was only about my fear of facing what I believed.
Wow. Wow, Chris, that's very intense, and I love that example because I'm just imagining when you and I come to that point eventually, it is hard to let go of that money script you're talking about. People depend on you. So let's hop into an aspect of that, which is a question we always like to ask on the podcast. So get ready for it.
Okay.
So when you think of clients, can you tell us one mistake that you're seeing clients make right now in this context? What's one mistake? And share that with us and maybe a little bit on avoiding that mistake.
Yeah, I think there's so much uncertainty right now with the economy and the politics and the markets and everything, that clients are often getting focused on the external and things they can't control. They want to know if they should be in or out of certain asset classes. They want to know where the market's going to be. They want to know what's coming next with their tax laws. And instead of focusing so much on that, I go back to, can you focus on what do you need to feel fulfilled and happy? A subject matter expert can fill in the technical options for you, but the more you understand about what you need and what makes you happy and what helps you feel fulfilled, the easier it is to identify those best options, not having to try to guess the impossible of what's going to be next in the news cycle.
All right. So let's go ahead and close out the podcast with our last question we always ask. And this is a listener favorite. We actually have a whole episode that goes through this question only for all of our guests so far, Chris. So we'll include you in that once we do our next wrap, which is, what's one action you would want everyone to take right now with their finances?
Identify and understand your top 3 to 5 values and how they relate to your money.
So what does that sound like? Tell us a little bit of, like, what does a value sound like?
Yeah, so a value might be, I want to take care of people I love, right? And how does money come into that? Is that I'm going to save to pay for school for them? Is that I'm going to buy a vacation property that we can all enjoy together? I'm going to host a holiday at my house and cover the meal and things like that. Whatever variation that takes, there's 1,000 different ones. But if you're someone who your family's very important to you and you want to take care of them, start to think about, how does that take shape with your money? And the more you can think that through, the more we can plan intentionally how to optimize those moments.
So Chris, I really appreciate all that you shared with us. A lot of these topics are very close to my heart and mind as a behavioral scientist. And I think you've given our listeners a lot to think about. Any last words before I close us out?
Just thanks for letting me come spend some time and talk about something that I'm really passionate about. Thank you.
Well, Chris, we can tell, and we're so glad that you're passionate about it because you've helped so many clients here. And I hope you can help our listeners too as they lean into this conversation. So we'll try to have you again here soon, Chris, so you can share more insights with us, especially on this topic of how our thoughts, our mind actually drives a lot of our technical decisions. So hope to see you again soon.
Thanks, me too.
So that's everything we have for today. This has been Money on Your Mind. A big thanks to financial planner Chris Davidson for joining me, and we'll be back next Wednesday with a new episode. Subscribe to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube so you don't miss it. And we'd appreciate it if you left us a rating too. I'm Michael Leirsch from Edelman Financial Engines. Talk to you next time.